Elizabeth Taylor, one of Hollywood's most iconic actresses, was known not only for her legendary career but also for her colorful and often tumultuous love life, which included 8 marriages. Phew, this is gonna be a ride. Let's get into it. Here's a rundown of the loves and times of Elizabeth Taylor. Taylor's first marriage was to Paris Hilton's great-uncle, Conrad Hilton Jr. Back then, he was heir to the Hilton Hotel fortune. Conrad and Elizabeth met in October 1949 at Macambo nightclub in Los Angeles. Just 7 months later, in May 1950, the young lovers married in a much-publicized ceremony in Beverly Hills. She was just 18 years old, and he was 23. In the weeks after their wedding, even before their 14-week European honeymoon was over, Elizabeth started seeing the red flags in their relationship and realized that she had made a mistake. Not only did she and Hilton have few interests in common, but she also endured his gambling, alcoholism, heroin addiction, and abusive behavior. So much so that, during one of his violent outbursts, Conrad Hilton kicked her in the stomach, causing her to miscarry their baby. After a tempestuous 8-month marriage, in January 1951, Elizabeth was granted a divorce on the grounds of mental cruelty. After escaping the clutches of Hilton, Taylor moved on to singledom and whilst doing so met husband number 2 Michael Wilding. Taylor first met Wilding in 1948, before her marriage to Conrad Hilton, whilst the two filmed the movie, The Conspirator. Then 3 years later, whilst filming Ivanhoe, they began a relationship. The 19-year-old Taylor was captivated by the 20-year age gap between her and Wilding, as she wanted the calm and quiet and security of friendship after the wretched storm of her first marriage. Sadly, Wilding was an old-school clout chaser, as he saw marrying her to be a golden opportunity to boost his own Hollywood career. Their marriage in 1952 birthed 2 sons, and with motherhood, as Taylor grew older and more confident in herself, she began to drift apart from Wilding, whose failing career was also a source of marital strife. When she was away filming Giant in 1955, gossip magazine Confidential published a report claiming that her husband had scandalously entertained strippers at their home. Needless to say, their separation ensued, with the divorce finalized in January 1957, ending their 5-year marriage. Despite this, Taylor was quoted years later as calling it a friendly divorce. Film producer Mike Todd was Taylor's 3rd husband. They married in Mexico in February 1957, when she was 3 months pregnant with their daughter Liza. At 25 years her senior, he was the first major love in her life. Unfortunately, tragedy struck when Todd died unexpectedly when his personal plane crashed in March 1958, leaving Taylor devastated. After Todd's death, Taylor sought comfort in the arms of his close friend, singer Eddie Fisher. Their affair caused a scandal, as Fisher was married to actress Debbie Reynolds at the time. Clearly, girl code wasn't important for Taylor, as Debbie Reynolds was actually one of her friends. The affair caused a public scandal, which resulted in Taylor being branded a homewrecker. Taylor and Fisher married in Las Vegas in May 1959. However, since karma never sleeps, their marriage came apart at the seams when she later fell in love with her Cleopatra co-star, Richard Burton. After 5 years of marriage, Taylor and Fisher divorced in March 1964. Step forward Elizabeth Taylor's infamous for TH, and wow, also her 5th husband, Welsh actor Richard Burton. They first met on the set of Cleopatra in 1963 and began a highly publicized affair. Remember, she was still married to Eddie Fisher, her dead husband's friend. Whilst equally scandalous was Burton himself, who was also married. Rumors about the affair began to circulate in the press and were confirmed by a paparazzi shot of them lounging on a yacht in Italy, seemingly without their spouses. The scandal caused Taylor and Burton to be condemned for erotic vagrancy by the Vatican. Also, with calls from the U.S. Congress to bar them from re-entering the USA. Once her divorce from Eddie Fisher came through in March 1964, Taylor, then 32, and Burton, 38, married 10 days later in Montreal, Canada. Perhaps there wasn't enough time to pick out wedding rings, as, surprisingly, the nuptials came without a diamond engagement ring. Instead, the bride wore a sapphire brooch bought for her by Burton. With him being the man who knew her best, he soon made up for this by gifting Elizabeth countless diamonds throughout their relationship, most especially an enormous 33-carat Asher-cut stone. Once married, Burton adopted Taylor's daughter, Liza Todd, whose father had tragically died in a plane crash. Together, Taylor and Burton adopted Maria McEwen, a German orphan whose adoption process Taylor had begun while married to Eddie Fisher. Dubbed Liz and Dick by the media, Taylor and Burton starred together in 11 films and led a jet-set lifestyle, spending millions on furs, diamonds, paintings, designer clothes, travel, food, liquor, a yacht, and a jet. However, the 10-year marriage was a fiery, intense love, with them allegedly arguing explosively and making up the same way. Subsequently, they divorced in June 1974. Only to spin the block and marry each other again 16 months later in Botswana. It's not clear why they even bothered having a second bite at the cherry, because they went on to divorce for a second time, less than 1 year later in July 1976. Soon after her final divorce from Burton, Taylor met her sixth husband, John Warner, a Republican politician from Virginia. A blind date to dinner with Queen Elizabeth II at the British Embassy in Washington, D.C., started with Warner driving his car to pick Taylor up at her hotel. Reportedly, Warner owned a horse farm, which drew Taylor's attention. Aged 44, she got engaged to Warner in September 1976 and married that December in Richmond, Virginia. After this, Taylor concentrated on working for her new husband's election campaign, with her star power helping to get him elected. She felt revitalized after the humiliation of another failed marriage to Burton. But Elizabeth was growing desperately lonely and depressed in Washington due to Warner being a workaholic. Life in Washington made her a drunk and a junkie. She worried that she would die of an overdose if she stayed. So, after nearly 5 years of marriage, Taylor and Warner divorced in November 1982. After this marriage, Taylor dated several high-profile men, including George Hamilton, and was engaged twice to another man. Then in 1988, Taylor met her seventh husband. Construction worker Larry Fortensky met Elizabeth at the Betty Ford Clinic, where they were both getting rehab. She from prescription pills, and he from alcohol. Being true representations of opposites attract, their vastly different backgrounds brought them closer at first. The couple married at the Neverland Ranch of her close friend Michael Jackson in October 1991. She was 59 and Larry was 49. Sadly, the pair split 5 years later in October 1996, allegedly due to Fortensky disliking the constant media attention and Taylor losing respect for him not working as well as him being obsessive-compulsive. The union with Fortensky was to be her final marriage, and after a checkered, complicated love life, Elizabeth Taylor died in February 2011, aged 79. Which of Elizabeth Taylor's relationships did you find most intriguing? What advice would you give 18-year-old Taylor about her future love life? Let's chat in the comments. Also, tell us who you'd like Love Network to cover next. Thanks for watching and subscribe to stay part of the network.